All right, so today I have a special treat for you, everyone. It's Kyle from here from Azora Hype, and I'm joined by the lovely Petra Halbur from Watchers on the Wall, and she's into many geekdom and fandoms, but more so into the Song of Ice and Fire and a Game of Thrones. Petra, can you tell us a little bit about yourself today?
Well, I recently moved to Massachusetts. Let me see. I'm currently in that wonderful purgatory state of researching grad schools, so I'm not exactly sure what direction I'm taking in that respect. But yeah, right now I'm settling in to get a sense of Boston and the surrounding area, and I work at Starbucks, so it's pretty good.
That was actually my first ever serving job before I bartended for almost a decade when I was living in Ottawa, and it was fun. I don't drink coffee, funny enough, though. The caffeine makes me a little jittery, but it was really fun being able to, serve and please people by giving them something they enjoyed.
I said I really enjoy it, yeah.
Yeah. So this is going to be really fun. I just thought of this out of the blue, and I'm thinking, we're going through the long night. We're waiting for Game of Thrones season 8 to come out in 2019, and I figured, all of us love to celebrate Game of Thrones and the Song of Ice and Fire. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to get to know more people from the fandom like you and other content creators and discuss why it's so appealing to like Game of Thrones and the Song of Ice and Fire. So,
Yeah.
Petra, this is a question that I always find very interesting, and I like to ask it. And it's like, how did you find A Song of Ice and Fire and a Game of Thrones, or did it find you? That's what I want to know.
I suppose it found me insofar as I was in college, and the scope of the show sort of came into my social sphere. I was always the only Game of Thrones. I've always been the only Game of Thrones fan amongst my friends, but I heard about the fandom, and I thought, oh, well, this is intriguing enough. So I thought, well, let me give it a shot. And they had a copy of Game of Thrones in my college bookstore, and I kind of on a whim, I bought it, and the rest is history.
See, it's interesting because people had been telling me about the show for quite some time. I knew George had written the books, but I never, I was working so much. I just didn't have the time to really jump into 4 books at the time, And then all of a sudden I had I had plans for Friday night, and they fell through, and I decided to watch 1 episode of Game of Thrones. Unfortunately, that turned into 10, and I watched the whole season in one evening. But I'm always so interested to see how people got into it, because some people said, hey, I've been reading the books before the show, or I watched the show and then I started reading the books, or some people just read the books or just watch the show. And, Game of Thrones kind of found me, and like someone had recommended, they're like, hey, you're not doing anything tonight, watch this show. And then, and now I'm an absolute junkie. It's pretty bad.
It was interesting for me because I started reading it, I think, my freshman year of college, and I finished the last book my senior year of college. So, and there were lots of stops and starts, and by the end I was listening to it on audiobook while I was commuting, because I didn't have the time to just sit and read. But my relationship with the Song of Ice and Fire kind of charts my college experience. So it's interesting, like Game of Thrones is sort of like my freshman and sophomore year, and A Dance with Dragons is my senior year.
That's pretty sweet. It's just this, because Lord of the Rings was really popular, but so much time had passed since the next Lord of the Rings, and and I'm thinking, like, 20 years from now, are we going to have another Game of Thrones phenomenon like this? And it's just so unique.
I mean, people always find stories to connect to. Genre fiction tends to be especially sort of conducive to creating very strong fandoms. But people thought Star Trek was the definitive sci-fi sort of serialized story, and then Star Wars came along. And not that they have to be in competition, but you have people coming up with using the same basic concepts and developing different stories from them. And I think people are always going to be drawn strongly to those sort of stories. I don't know if I'm actually making any sense.
No, I mean, the hero's journey is in all of these stories, and I think we see, Game of Thrones. There's so many multiple perspectives. We see the stories through so many different lenses. And I'm not saying other movies and television, we don't get that. I'm just saying that this story is so unique because there's literally that many perspectives that you can either agree or disagree with. And that's why I personally enjoyed it so much. And this is the question I wanted to ask you is, what was the main reason you were drawn to the Song of Ice and Fire in a Game of Thrones? Was there a particular chapter, a particular episode, part of the story? I mean, for me, it was magic and the supernatural elements. When I heard dragons, I'm in. So for you, what was it?
I didn't fully fall in love with the books really until the Reek chapters in A Dance with Dragons. I had enjoyed the series up until that point, but when I got to Reek's chapters, I had never read anything quite like it. It was because we're all familiar with that sort of archetypal henchman, but who kind of shuffles around it, the Igor sort of character. But I'd never read anything from his perspective, and as disturbing as it was, every time I finished a chapter and saw or heard in the audiobooks Reek or Theon as the title of the next chapter, I kind of went, all right, this is going to be interesting. It might haunt me later, but this is a very, very interesting storyline that I'm currently. A
Ghost in Winterfell jumps out to mind when you like that chapter was one of my. I think one of the 5 best chapters that George has written out of all the Song of Ice and Fire books so far. That one is just. It's like you're trying to figure out what's going on, and then once you realize Theon is Reek, it's like, oh, okay, you got this Theon Durden thing going on. Yeah. I said Theon Durden. Wow.
Yeah. Oh, I said no. The Tyler Durden comparison works. The Theon Reek connection had been given away to me ahead of time, so I knew that he was Reek. But yeah, I didn't realize just how deep into his psychology we were going to get in the books, and that was, yeah, that left an impression for sure. George
doesn't treat us like kids, that's for sure. For any of you that haven't read the books, the show is that, I mean, it's pretty bloody in the show, but if you read the books, there's quite a bit of seriousness that can trigger you into some different thoughts. Now, you did I watched your leitmotif video a few times, and it's such an interesting subject that hasn't really been talked about a whole lot. So, can you talk about one of the best composers of the modern era? For me, I love Ramin Djawadi. He's his music has been in multiple TV shows that I've watched. Person of interest, of course, Game of Thrones. Why did you decide to take a look at these themes, and why are they used in the show?
Well, I've loved Djawadi's score since the first season, and his use of themes was something that I just noticed. The score is usually one of the first things that I notice in a. It's always something that I'm aware of while I'm watching, and I wanted to do a video essay for Watchers on the Wall just to give it a try, and I thought, well, I should really pick a subject that I can't write a think piece about. Like if I'm going to make a point in a video, it should be something that actually can be explained better in a visual and auditory medium. So I thought, well, doing a video about the score would be a good place to start. That way I can actually, I kind of made a joke about this in the video, but it's very difficult to write about music. And so since I really wanted to share my thoughts on his use of theme, I thought that was a good way to, that was a good subject for my first video essay.
Music is such an expressive thing too, right? I mean, obviously within Game of Thrones, we have the Battle of the Bastards and the episode Baylor, and there's this suspense, or the music is setting the mood. And by the way, everyone go check out her channel, Meandering Machinations. I will put the link to this actual video in the description of this video, so make sure you go check that out. But something about the music within the show, because it is such an epic scope that really makes it feel more real. And just the way, I mean, I've loved the soundtrack ever since season 1. Even in the first ever scene in a Game of Thrones, that eerie White Walker theme, and it's just it brings you in more so than per se another show that wouldn't have this kind of this classical score. So I found that so interesting. Like nobody had really dived in that deeply to deconstruct his work and how important it is to the TV show, because the books and the show, they're different, and we get these visual cues, pieces of foreshadowing that we might be able to look back on after something has happened, but also through the music, that's something that we haven't explored as deeply. So when I watched the video, I'm like, oh sweet, and then I watched it like 4 times in a row. So I was like, well, I wouldn't have thought of that. I don't think I could have deconstructed something that deeply. I'm just not that smart, but yeah, go ahead.
I was saying, for me, themes, I first became sort of aware of what a motif was and how it could represent a character way back when I watched Lost. That was my introduction to, I didn't have the vocabulary for it yet, but I knew that that was the music associated with that character or that concept. And the way that a theme could, the same notes of theme could be changed, or the arrangement of a theme could be used to convey different emotions or to reflect how a character could change over time, was something that really struck me in the Game of Thrones score, because of course the characters are all so dynamic. What really blows me away is that that's actually their character progression is actually reflected in the evolution of their musical themes. There are certain scenes that if you understand which themes apply to whom, you could just listen to the music and you could have an understanding of what's actually happening.
Because he does recycle the same initial like Stark theme or Lannister theme, but as a, like for example, Goodbye Brother, the one that's associated with Robb and the Red Wedding, it's like so much more sad than that triumphant like that northern power that you would feel with the regular Stark theme. And it's like, oh, when I've listened to that piece, I think that's my favorite overall piece from any of the seasons. I'm just like, wow, I think how strongly I felt about that particular scene, and that it was like, wow, I can't believe they're gone,
And Jody's really cellos. Whenever he composes something to be played on a cello, you know it's going to be good.
You got to be really talented to be able to, first of all, know how to play these instruments, but to record them and refine them and then make it all work. I don't know. It's just
a musician, and the very concept of having to compose something for an orchestra blows my mind. Anyone who can do it at all has my utmost respect.
I play guitar. I've been playing guitar for about 15 years, but I can play the djembe and an African bongo drum, but that's about it. So piano, anything like that, I've tried, or like drums, like the being able to stay on time is not something that I'm very good at, because I'm usually just playing punk rock music. But so other than leitmotifs, I met you at Con of Thrones. We got to speak a little bit about your obsession with the Greyjoys, which I completely disagree with. I hate the Greyjoys, but see, that's the beauty of yeah, I know you're gonna get mad at me, but that's the thing about the Song of Ice and Fire and a Game of Thrones. You can pick and choose which storylines you want to follow more closely or follow less closely. And well, talk about your experience with Con of Thrones, because this really brought you into the story, and that was something for me. Like, I almost didn't go, and my friend was like, hey, you should go. This could be a good opportunity to help grow your fan base and get to know people within the community, to maybe do some networking. And I don't know, I had the time of a decade at Con of Thrones, so I'm interested to hear from your perspective. I know you had a blast, though.
Yeah, it was one of those few events that I can truly call life-changing, and that's not an exaggeration. I met people for the first time, and some people I'd known on the internet, and I met them for the first time in person, who are now very good friends. And getting to speak late into the night with people about Game of Thrones was such a joy, because in my real life, most of my social circle, they don't watch Game of Thrones, or if they do, people aren't as into it as I am. And so getting to talk with other mega fans was such a privilege. And getting to be on panels was so much fun. I'm a little bit of a ham. Like, I love performing and doing all of that stuff. But really getting to moderate panels and give a presentation on the history of the Greyjoys, that was and having people come up to me afterwards and say, oh, you made a really good point, or I didn't know I had considered that, or I didn't know about that aspect of the lore. And thank you for bringing that up. That was hugely impactful.
It's I only got to check out panels at the end, at the last day, like the last few hours. I got to go see the father and son panel where you guys were talking about Tywin and
Oh, yeah,
Tyrion.
yeah. It took me a second.
I think Sir Hunt was on that panel. I was just chatting with him yesterday. But it was, there was so many different things going on, and everybody's there for the same reason, because they want to enjoy an experience where you can basically let yourself free. Nobody's judging you, because like people were, the cosplaying was amazing. First of all, like that was incredible. I saw like that the person dressed as the White Walker. That was incredible. The Night King specifically, and Wun.
The photo of him holding the baby.
Oh yes, actually, I have it in one of my videos. That was creepy.
But I will say, one of the, you said like everyone was there for the same reason. The resort that we were at, there was some other conference or something taking place, and I was in my Cersei dress, and I was talking to two other people from Watchers about Game of Thrones in the line to get a coffee. And this woman, this like maybe middle-aged woman standing in front of us, finally turned around and went, "Okay, you got to help me. What is going on?" There are people walking around in costumes. Why are you all here? And we were like, it's Con of Thrones, Game of Thrones. We got to sort of tell her a little bit about it, and she seemed a little scared, but kind of intrigued that we were a bunch of adults dressed up in costumes.
That by the way, I'm a little sad that it's not at Nashville again. I not Nashville, Tennessee again. I understand why they're doing it in Dallas. I'm gonna go regardless, because I had a blast. But that resort was just so beautiful. Just walking in there at nighttime. I remember I was walking through at like 3 a.m. I didn't get very much sleep. I partied pretty hard, but it was just so fresh. Like the air was so fresh, and you walked in there, and then other people are just having such a good time, and that positive energy was everywhere all weekend. That's something that was unforgettable for me.
Yeah, me too.
The first day I was there, I had someone walk up to me. They're like, "You're Azora Hype." I'm like, "Whoa!" Like, I expected people to know what I look like, because I knew people to watch my videos. But that was the cool thing too. They're like, "Oh, like, can you sign something for me?" Or I don't know. That was nuts.
Yeah.
It's always so flattering. But so you're going again this year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming. I'm going again this year. I got to meet Luca and many other people from Watchers on the Wall, so that's going to be fun. They haven't released too much information on it, and I know some of you have been asking me what's going to be going on, but I'm sure sooner than later they're going to start to release some more information on that. But if you haven't considered going, you absolutely should if you're a fan of Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire. Is there any final point you would like to make about Con of Thrones?
I love the communal experience that fandom offers. But so often it's a community, but it's online. And so the opportunity to get together with people inhabiting the same actual space, getting to talk to people face to face with the things that we're all passionate about, that doesn't happen very often. And when you get the chance to experience something like that, it's really not something you should turn down.
It isn't. Like I made some like George, one of my co-hosts for some of my shows. Not George Martin.
George.
I knew that was good.
And I went,
No, not George R. R. Martin. Everyone, George Sartiano. We call him Young Jeezy. He's a bit older. We make fun of him because he's getting up there in age. But he was the one who convinced me to actually go to Con of Thrones. Not George Martin. Everyone. I wish I had a line to George Martin.
You could have milked. Oh, my friend George, and never expanded, and none of us would have known.
But not George Martin, everyone. Although I would like him to be my friend, so I can pry more information out of him for the next book. George, get that book done. So I know you have specific thoughts on this. I want to ask this question. Do you believe that waiting for Game of Thrones until 2019 is a mistake, or is it not a mistake? That's what I want to know, because I saw you talking on Twitter a little bit. I don't want to spoil your answer, because I know how you said you feel. But yeah, let's hear you have to say about that.
For me, if the creators of the show feel that a 2019 release date is necessary to make the final season of Game of Thrones the best season the best that they can make it, then I'm fine with it. And to be honest, there's something very special about the feeling of a fandom right before the final installment is released. Like I remember the Harry Potter fandom before the Deathly Hallows was published. I'm going to try to enjoy it for as long as I can. So as much as I really want to find out what happens to everyone, I am going to try to enjoy this sense of everyone waiting and speculating together. And when the final season airs, the final season will air. There's nothing we can really do about it to speed up the process.
It's interesting because a lot of people are very critical about season 7, and I get that,
and so am I.
Yeah.
But I still have, I can understand.
It wasn't my favorite season. Like season 1's my favorite season, and I actually think that some of the pressure, I don't want to say the pressure is off, because they know they have to nail the final season to truly make it one of the best TV series of all time. I feel like the writing is going to be like season 1, where they have it's I don't know. There's going to be this familiarity with season 8 that we're going to feel. Now, final 2 questions I have for you are: since season 8 will be the final season, we know we're going to be getting some spinoffs, but is there a particular theory or thing that you think is going to happen in season 8, and something that you think might be debunked? Because right now, all there is out there is people trying to either predict something or debunk it, because we only got one more season, right?
Yeah. One theory I've heard, actually, I think from the cast of Game of Thrones in interviews and audio commentaries, that I certainly hope is true, it would thematically make a lot of sense, is the theory that the Iron Throne, which is made up of swords, will be revealed to contain Valyrian steel that's necessary to defeat the White Walkers. And so in order to save Westeros, the Iron Throne will be dismantled for the Valyrian steel inside it. I would love that to happen.
That would be breaking of the wheel. I mean, things need to change democratically, right?
Throne, which has been this sort of ugly, cast this ugly shadow across the history of this country, being torn apart for the greater good is a pretty satisfying.
And a lot of people have had to die to just get to this point. I mean, the Children of the Forest were getting back and back. We can go all the way back to then. It's basically a holy war, but and I mean, things need to change. And I personally think that a lot of people are saying that history is going to repeat itself within the story, and then someone else will just sit the Iron Throne. I think there will be a ruler, but there will be more of kind of like an Arthurian legend, Knights of the Round Table type of thing, where people, there's not one person is just in charge anymore.
Yeah, and I think in the show especially, they've been hinting towards the establishment of like a proto-democracy, which would make sense, because this issue of having one person with ultimate control has been shown to create problems. And so
Joffrey being a prime example of hereditary monarchy, that did not work.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay, that's an interesting one. And now I'm even more interested to hear which one you think is going to be debunked. See, the one I hate is Bran is the Night King. I don't think that's a thing. That one just, I don't think it can work.
True. I just think it is fun. Like, why? Like, people don't seem to have an issue with the bolt-on skin changer, like Roose Bolton was a skin changer theory, even though that's ridiculous. Why do people hate the Bran Night King theory so much? Like, why does it longer?
I mean, they're both existing in the same timeline. They're both physically there. That's what I have a problem. I mean, like if the Night King is Bran is in his mind, like there's this like time loop where like this paradox where he keeps on getting trapped in his mind or something like that. That I could see work, but physically being there together, because is that both Bran Stark physically in those bodies?
Well, I think it's that the theory I think is that he will warg into the man who gets turned into the Night King, and so he'll be effectively like warged into
the actual ritual that's happening. Yes.
Yeah, and somehow he'll warg into the poor guy, and so when the guy guy's brain gets turned into the Night King, Bran will be turned into the Night King as well, or at least he'll be stuck in the Night King's brain, kind of watching everything.
So like what Blood Raven, or sorry, the Three-Eyed Raven. I always say Blood Raven. Three-Eyed Raven told him he kind of gets stuck in the weir net, and then yeah.
I think that's the idea. Yeah, I don't think it'll happen, but it's one of the creepier theories. So I'll say sure, like that's one that I'm happy to see debunked.
But personally, which one would you like to see debunked from your own perspective?
I guess I'm not crazy about the Young Griff Blackfire Rebellion conspiracy theory, simply because I think I prefer Varys's more straightforward motivations in the show, that he really is a man who wants to make Westeros a better place and who truly does serve the realm, whereas if he's doing all of this to get a secret Blackfire put on the throne, I feel like it actually makes his motivations less interesting. If he's just another person who's trying to get his guy crowned, to me that undermines a lot of what I find so interesting about Varys. It's a very compelling theory. I think it's quite possibly true, but I can't say I love it.
It's interesting because everybody calls that Aegon Fagon. I personally believe he's actually I actually personally believe that he's Illyrio and Sarah's son, Varys' sister. When Tyrion is in the manse, he finds a young boy's clothes, and that's kind of for me what I don't know. Do you think we have time to see that in the show? I don't think we're going to see. You think we probably won't see Aegon in season 8? They don't have enough time to do that, right?
No, and truth be told, I'm not crazy about the Young Griff storyline in the books. Dare I say it? Simply because it feels like it comes very much out of left field. It may be written in to have a very satisfying conclusion and make sense. They cannot possibly have time to put that in the show. I can't think. If they were going to add something completely random in the show, I would like it to be a Kraken dragon battle.
Okay, I'd be okay with that. I mean, anything to do with big monsters and magic. I mean,
well, my thing is, this isn't really a theory, unless I guess I came up with the theory myself. But there's a horn. I forget what it's called, but we have a dragon binder that controls dragons, and there's supposed to be a horn that can control krakens. I mentioned it at the Con of Thrones panel that I did, and I've forgotten the name of it since. But it's a horn that can control krakens. And so I love the concept of, in the books or in the show, Daenerys gets Euron gets hold of Dragonbinder, and he's controlling Daenerys's dragons. But Daenerys gets a hold of the Kraken horn and controls the Krakens. So you have this like switch of sigils where the Dragon Queen is controlling the Kraken and the Kraken guy is controlling the dragons, as they have this Godzilla versus King Kong-esque.
Oh, and that's like Lovecraftian battle of super gigantic monsters, and it'll be like super dark and scary.
Like Pacific Rim, like big giant battle, but with
How would George write that? That would be crazy. All right, so that's going to do it for today. There's some tinfoil for you. Dragons versus Krakens. Daenerys is going to be the Kraken controller, and Euron's going to control the dragons. That's going to be crazy. Where can we find you? I know you have YouTube. You write for Watchers. We got some Twitter, and go.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at PL Halbur. Please subscribe to my channel, Meandering Machinations, and of course, you can always find me on Watchers.
Yeah, she does. So she's doing all sorts of articles and Watchers on the Wall. What I'll do is I'll actually link a couple of her articles so you can go check out her work. And then, of course, the leitmotif stuff we talked about earlier, put that in the description as well. And, we're all trying to stay busy during the long night. This is another reason to get excited for Game of Thrones Season 8. She has some great thoughts. And, of course, go say hello. Go say hello. Make a new friend. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, everyone. be safe, and hype and love.
Fuck the king.
How much for your little clam?